She changed the locks while I was gone. Just like that. No warning, no call, no explanation. I stood on my own porch, my porch, turning the key that no longer fit, listening to the quiet click of a deadbolt that answered more loudly than any words could. That lock said, "You're not welcome." That lock said, "This is no longer your home." But it was mine. God help me, it was still mine. The key felt foreign in my hand, a piece of metal I'd known for decades, suddenly a stranger. I tried again, jiggling it, thinking maybe the cold April air had made the mechanism stick, but it was no use. Then my eyes caught something glinting in the faint morning light, something that hadn't been there when I left. A tiny, sterile white sticker near the handle, Seculock Installations, it read, and below it, 2 words that stopped my heart cold. Friday, 3:15 p.m. Friday. The day after I'd left to care for my oldest friend. Not even a full 24 hours. The cruelty of it was so specific, so surgical, it took my breath away. This wasn't a panicked reaction to a break-in. This was a scheduled appointment. While I was 2 hours away, holding Clara's hand while she grieved her sister, they were here, erasing me. I pressed the doorbell, my finger trembling slightly. I waited. Nothing. I knocked, then rang again. Still nothing but the hollow echo of my own hope dying. My old hydrangeas, trimmed back by someone who clearly didn't understand them, stood like small skeletons by the porch steps. I didn't cry. I wish I could tell you I did. That it all poured out in one clean, cathartic sob, but no. I stood still, let the hurt settle quietly like dust, and got back in my car. They thought they knew me, the quiet, accommodating woman they could push into a corner. But they didn't know who they'd locked out. Not yet. I parked 2 blocks down, just out of sight. I didn't know where else to go. Clara was 2 hours away, and I couldn't bear to tell her not yet. I couldn't stand to hear her say, "I told you they'd try something like this." I needed to think. I sat in my old Civic, the engine off, the silence inside the car a perfect match for the silence from the house. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from a disbelief so profound it felt like a physical illness. This was the house my husband Jack and I bought in 1974, with barely enough for a down payment and our toddler Alex on my hip. It had avocado green appliances and rust in the tub, but the maple in the front yard lit up like gold every fall, and that was enough for us. Jack died on that porch 12 years ago. He was in his favorite chair with his second cup of coffee and the morning paper folded in his lap. I've lived alone ever since. Have you ever loved someone so completely that you couldn't see they'd stopped loving you back? That's how it was with my son, Alex. After Jack passed, he was my rock for a while. Then came Celeste. She was a woman with sharp cheekbones and even sharper words. She worked in branding, which seemed to mean telling people how to make themselves look more expensive. From the moment she first stepped into my home, she looked at it like it was something to be fixed. "The kitchen is so closed concept," she'd said, wrinkling her nose, "and the floors creak like a horror movie." She said the place smelled like old fabric. What she meant was, it smelled like me. They'd been living in a sleek, empty-feeling loft downtown. But when Alex's company downsized and Celeste's freelance work dried up, they needed what Alex called a bridge. "Just until we figure out our next move, Mom," he'd said on the phone. "A few weeks, maybe a couple months. It would really help us out." That was all it took. He could have asked me to sleep on nails, and I would have gotten the hammer ready. They moved in on a Sunday with 4 suitcases and an air purifier. That first day, I found my wedding album, which had sat on the sideboard for 20 years, tucked away in the hall closet. Alex scratched the back of his neck when I asked. "She's just trying to make it feel livable, Mom." "It was already livable," I said. He just smiled tightly. "Yeah, but you know, modern, that was the start. Bit by bit, I became a tenant in my own life. First, they rearranged the living room. Then, my coffee maker was replaced with a complicated machine I couldn't operate. Celeste was plant-based, she said, and the smell of my milk in the fridge bothered her. So I stopped buying it. She called me Nancy, not Mom, not even Mrs. Tanner. Just Nancy, like I was the neighbor whose dog barked too long. Have you ever felt like you're disappearing in your own home? I started tiptoeing from room to room, carrying my quiet like a tray I was scared to drop. One night, I overheard them in the kitchen. She keeps leaving dishes in the sink, Celeste whispered, her voice sharp as broken glass. It's cluttered. It's bad energy. I heard Alex mumble, she's used to her own way. She's trying. And then Celeste's reply, cold and final. Well, trying's not enough. I stood on the other side of the wall, my hands damp with soap, my own words swallowed back like bad medicine. Still, I thought it was temporary. I thought that soon they'd find their next condo, move on, thank me, and I'd get my home back. The home where I could leave a puzzle half-finished on the dining table and wear my worn-out slippers in the kitchen without judgment. But temporary stretched on. Then came Clara's call, her voice weak with pneumonia, her heart broken from losing her sister. Would you come for a few nights? She'd asked. Of course, I said, of course. I left a note on the counter. Back Sunday by noon. Take care, N. Nothing dramatic. Just what a person says when she assumes she still has a place at the table, when she assumes she still owns the walls around her. I was wrong. As I sat there in my car, the disbelief began to fade, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a coup, a quiet, polite suburban coup. The sun began to set, bruising the sky pink and orange. I watched the automatic porch light flicker on, the same one Jack and I installed one summer evening. It was then, seeing that familiar glow on a house I could no longer enter, that the shaking in my hands finally stopped. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I wasn't driving away for good. This wasn't over. That evening, I tried to sleep in the driver's seat. My knees stiffened, my neck cramped, and at 2 a.m, I had to find a 24-hour gas station just to use the restroom. I bought a coffee I didn't want just to not feel like a loiterer. The cashier, a boy no older than my grandson would be, smiled kindly at me. Have a good night, ma'am, he said. I nearly burst into tears right there, just because someone saw me, because for a moment, I wasn't invisible. By 6 a.m., I was parked again near the house, where I could see the front porch. The lights inside turned on, and then the front door opened. Celeste stepped out onto the porch. She was wearing a silk robe, the kind you see in magazines, and she was sipping from the mug I got her last Christmas, the one that said, Queen Bee. She glanced at the lawn, then back at the door, and disappeared inside. She looked so comfortable, so entitled, like she had every right in the world to be there. And that was all I needed to see. Not rage, not even sadness, just a profound and final clarity. I put the car in gear and drove away. But this time, I wasn't just circling the block. This time, I had a destination. The locksmith's name was Ernie. He used to fix our screen doors back in the day, a short man who always wore suspenders and smelled of pipe tobacco, even years after he quit. Jack liked him, charges fair and never asks unnecessary questions, Jack used to say. That's exactly what I needed. I found his number scribbled in the back of an old address book, between a pie crust recipe and the number for a pediatrician who had long since retired. I didn't think he'd still be working, but he picked up on the second ring. Ernie speaking. Hi, Ernie, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It's Nancy Tanner. There was a pause, then a warm chuckle. Well, I'll be. How's Jack? Gone 12 years now, Ernie. He went quiet for a moment. Sorry to hear that. He was a good one. He was, I said, swallowing hard. Ernie, I need some locks changed. He didn't ask why. He just asked when. Today, I said. Early. I'll be there at 7 sharp. I parked 3 blocks away and walked, the morning air crisp against my cheeks. Ernie was already waiting by the porch, his toolbox in hand. He nodded at the new sleek silver handle. "Looks different," he said. "Not your style." "It's not," I replied. He didn't smile, just got to work. I stood beside him, my arms crossed, and watched as he expertly removed the cold modern hardware, soulless, like everything Celeste touched. He replaced it with a heavy brass deadbolt that clicked with a sound of weight and memory. When he was done, he handed me 2 new keys. They felt solid in my palm, real. "You want a third?" he asked. "No," I said. 2 is enough." He packed up his tools, then looked at me, his eyes holding something between curiosity and respect. "You all right, Nancy?" I met his gaze directly. "I am now." At 7:32 a.m., I opened the front door to my own house and stepped inside. It smelled different, lavender detergent and some expensive floral mist. My photos were still gone from the sideboard. The blanket I'd crocheted was folded neatly on a chair, placed for looks, not for warmth. But the floor still creaked in that familiar spot by the stairs. The clock above the fridge still ticked half a beat too slow. The sun still lit the east wall of the kitchen, like a quiet promise. It was still my house. I went straight to the master bedroom, the room Jack and I had shared for 38 years. They'd changed everything. My quilt was gone, replaced by a plain beige duvet. My lace curtains were gone, replaced with blackout panels. I unplugged the diffuser, puffing out that cloying scent on my nightstand. Then I opened the closet. My clothes were gone. In their place were neatly stacked boxes, labeled in Celeste's sharp handwriting. Seasonal. Donate. One by one, I carried each box of my own things out of the garage and brought them back inside. Then I turned to the spare room where I'd been sleeping. Celeste's shoes were lined up along the baseboard like a row of little soldiers. Her expensive monogrammed suitcases sat at the foot of the bed. Her silk robe hung on the back of the door. Very carefully, I began to carry her things outside. I didn't throw them. I didn't dump them. I placed them. I folded the clothes that needed folding and lined everything up neatly along the edge of the front lawn, right by the porch. It looked like a very strange, very high-end yard sale. By the time I finished, a jogger slowed as he passed, his eyebrows raised. I gave him a small, polite wave. He waved back, looking confused. Then I went inside, brewed a pot of my own tea from the tin I'd kept hidden behind the cereal boxes, and sat down at my kitchen table to wait. At 9:11 a.m., I heard a key scrape against the new lock. It failed. Then came the rattle of the doorknob, followed by a sharp, impatient knock. "Nancy?" Celeste's voice was high and thin, stretched with irritation. "There's something wrong with the lock." I took a slow sip of my tea. The knocking came again, harder this time. "Nancy, open this door! Why are my things on the lawn?" Then came the voice I had once lived for, the voice of the baby boy I'd raised in this very house. "Mom, Alex? Are you in there?" I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. His face was pale. Hers was flushed red with anger. I looked at them both, then glanced down at the neat piles of their belongings on my grass. "They're not on the lawn," I said quietly. "They're on my lawn." Celeste started, "Nancy, this is completely uncalled for." I looked at her, my gaze flat and steady. "So is changing the locks on someone else's house." "It was a misunderstanding," Alex said quickly, stepping forward as if to mediate. "No," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "It wasn't." He stopped, and for the first time, he looked at me like he was seeing something new, something he didn't recognize. "You locked me out of my home," I said, keeping my voice even. "You didn't call. You didn't warn me. You left me outside like a stray animal. And you," I added, turning my eyes to Celeste, "planned it days in advance." She had the decency to look away. "I didn't think you'd make a scene," she muttered. "I'm not," I replied. "This isn't a scene. It's a boundary." Alex looked from my face to the open door behind me, then back again. He was confused, as if the ground under his feet had shifted an inch, just enough to rattle his composure. "Mom," he said, his voice low, You're overreacting. I nodded slowly, letting that word land between us. Overreacting. That's the word you're going with. He blinked. You left me to sleep in my car. At 74 years old, Alex. I used a gas station bathroom and drank vending machine coffee. That's what your silence cost me. He looked down at the porch steps, and I don't know if it was guilt or just discomfort. But he didn't argue. Beside him, Celeste crossed her arms. I didn't think you'd be back so early, she said flatly. You said Sunday, but you didn't say when. I said noon, I replied. She shrugged, as if a few hours excused everything, as if locking a woman out of her home was just a matter of calendar management. I moved from the doorway, but only just enough. You can come in now, I said. Get what's left. Alex looked at me, his eyes wide. Where are we supposed to go? He asked. I raised my eyebrows. You didn't seem very worried about where I was supposed to sleep. That's not the same, he snapped, his voice finally cracking. You have this place. I had this place, I corrected him gently. Until Friday, until you decided to erase me from it. That's not fair, he said. No, I agreed. It's not. I looked at my watch. You have 15 minutes. They moved past me without another word. Celeste's heels tapped on the hardwood floors like angry little gunshots. She went straight to the bedroom and began yanking what was left of her things from the closet. Alex lingered in the hallway. I just don't understand why you're being so rigid, he said. I turned to face him fully. You don't understand why I no longer want people who betrayed me to live in my home. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. I invited you in when you were struggling, I said, my voice still quiet. I made space. I gave you warmth. You gave me silence and exclusion. Do you have any idea how many of my things I found in the garage, in boxes labeled donate in her handwriting? He said nothing. You said nothing, Alex, over and over again. Your silence was your choice. The minutes ticked by in the sound of quiet zippers and awkward shuffling. They came back down the stairs, each with a suitcase. Celeste didn't look at me. I'll send someone for the rest of the furniture, she said, her chin high. No, you won't, I replied. You will call me, and we will schedule a time. And I will be here when it happens. Alex stared at me. You don't trust us? No, I said simply. Not anymore. Celeste stepped outside first without a goodbye. Alex paused on the threshold, turning back one last time. This isn't how families treat each other, he said, his voice thick with accusation. I looked at my son, the boy whose fevers I'd cooled, whose heartbreaks I'd mended, and I felt a deep, profound sorrow. No, I said softly, it's not. And then I closed the door. I didn't slam it. I just closed it. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't a tense, waiting silence. It was a peaceful silence. It was the sound of my house breathing again. I walked through the rooms, just absorbing it. The air already felt lighter. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Alex. Can we talk later? I'm trying to understand all this. It just happened so fast. I didn't reply, because it didn't happen fast. It happened slowly, over 1,000 small moments, when I let myself disappear to keep a peace that was never really there to begin with. The real peace I was discovering was something you had to make for yourself. It took less than an hour to reclaim my kitchen. My red kettle was back in its rightful place. My cookbooks were on the counter, open to my favorite dog-eared pages. I lit the cinnamon candle Clara had given me for my birthday, the one Celeste had sneered at. The spicy, warm scent felt like a declaration of independence. Later that afternoon, I pulled out the box of important papers I kept under my bed. Inside, I found the deed to the house, the paper crisp and official. My name was on it, only my name. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing it in black and white. It was a soft yes from the universe, right when I needed to hear it. My phone vibrated again. Alex, I think we should talk soon. Things are tense, but maybe we can work through it. I ignored it. Instead, I looked up the number for Howard Leonard, my lawyer. He was the one who handled everything when Jack passed, with a quiet, no-nonsense efficiency. Leonard and Westman, the receptionist answered. "Hello," I said. "This is Nancy Tanner. I'd like to schedule a meeting with Mr. Leonard." "Do you have a matter in progress?" she asked. "No," I said, a small smile touching my lips. "But I think it's time I did." The lawyer's office still smelled of leather and printer ink. Howard's hair had thinned and his glasses were thicker, but his eyes were just as sharp. "Nancy," he said, shaking my hand. "It's been a while." I told him everything, from the rearranged furniture to the changed locks. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "You're not the first," he said quietly. "Elder clients who let family move in and suddenly find themselves pushed out. But you might be the first I've met who fought back before it was too late." "I don't want to be angry anymore, Howard," I told him. "I just want to be clear. I want the house protected. I want my documents updated. I want to make sure I am never put in this position again." He nodded. "We'll revise the will. We'll lock down the property. And we'll set up a power of attorney with someone you actually trust." "That would be my banker," I said. "Not my son." "No problem," he said. "I'll draft everything." By the time I left his office, the sky was streaked with gold. I stopped at the grocery store on the way home and bought the good butter, the jam Jack liked, and a small bouquet of fresh tulips. That night, I ate dinner at my own table with the radio on low. No one critiqued the meal. No one opened my mail. No one asked if I'd considered repainting the kitchen something more neutral. It was just me, and it was enough. A few days later, there was a knock at the door. It was almost evening. Through the window, I could see Alex standing alone on the porch. He was holding a small paper bag from a local bakery. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Hi," he said. "I brought your favorite, the lemon bars from Carmichael's." I didn't move. "You think dessert is going to fix this?" He winced. "No, I didn't know she was planning to do that, Mom. Not until after." "Then why didn't you call me? Why didn't you stop it?" He looked down at the steps. "I didn't want to lose our place here." I felt the final piece of my old self, the one who made excuses for him, fall away. "You lost it the minute you decided my place here didn't matter." We stood there in the growing twilight. "I want to fix this," he said, his voice weak. "No, Alex," I said quietly. "You want to feel better. That's not the same." He finally looked up at me then, and I could see the truth of my words hit him. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "I'm just clear, and you don't live here anymore. You don't get to just show up at my door with lemon bars, pretending you still do." He nodded slowly. "I understand." And he turned and walked away. I watched him go, then closed the door and locked it, not out of fear, but out of peace. Life settled into a new rhythm after that, a quiet, peaceful rhythm that was all my own. I called Clara and finally told her everything. She let out a long, low whistle. "Oh, honey," she said, "you finally stopped asking for permission to be the owner of your own life." Her words stuck with me. We all reach an age where silence stops being lonely and starts being a shield. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. The handwriting was Alex's, heavy and pressed into the paper. "Mom," it read, "you were right. I let her reshape everything. I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was just hiding. I miss Sunday mornings. I miss home. If there's a way back, even slowly, I'll walk it. If not, I understand." I read it 3 times. It was the first honest thing he'd said in years. I didn't reply. Not yet. The holidays came and went. For Thanksgiving, I made myself a small, perfect meal. I set one place at the table, lit a candle, and toasted Jack with a cup of tea. It wasn't sad. It was serene. In early December, another package arrived. Inside was a small gold-plated locket. When I opened it, one side held a tiny photo of me, much younger, holding Alex on my hip. The other side was blank. There was no note. I knew it was from Celeste, a gesture. But gestures are only worth as much as the change that follows. And I hadn't seen any change yet. I spent the winter reclaiming my space, not just physically, but emotionally. I repainted the living room a warm, sunny yellow. I filled the house with music. I hosted Clara for a weekend, and we laughed until our sides hurt. I was rediscovering the woman I was before I became a caretaker, a landlord, a doormat. I was becoming myself again. On a cold, clear Sunday in March, Alex called. "I was wondering if we could sit down," he said. "Just the two of us." "You can come at 3, I said, "for 1 hour." He arrived on time. We sat in the living room, a polite distance between us. He talked. He apologized, really apologized, without excuses. He told me he and Celeste were in counseling. He said he was trying to understand how he'd let things get so broken. I listened. "You changed the will, didn't you?" he asked finally. "Yes," I said. He swallowed. "Did you cut me out?" "No," I told him. "But I changed what's automatic. From now on, Alex, anything you might inherit from me will be based on the relationship we build from this day forward, not the one we keep pretending is still intact." His face colored, but he didn't argue. He knew I was right. When the hour was up, he stood to leave. "I don't know if I deserve your trust again," he said quietly. "You don't," I agreed. "But you can try to earn it. I don't know if our story has a happy ending. Maybe not the kind you see in movies. He calls me once a week now. We talk for about 10 minutes. It's a start. The house is quiet, but it's a good quiet. It's the sound of peace. Last week, I booked a trip. A train tour through the national parks with Clara. No husbands, no children, no apologies. Just me and my oldest friend going to see the world. I learned something, standing on that porch with a key that didn't work. I learned that choosing your own peace isn't giving up on family. It's finally choosing yourself. Every mother, every grandmother gives pieces of herself away. We do it gladly. But the question is, do we leave anything for ourselves? The answer has to be yes. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Have you ever had to make the hard choice between family obligation and your own well-being? Remember, darling, it's never ever too late to come home to yourself.